Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Data Dispatch. Hope everybody is having a good day. An interesting thing in terms of price action in the broader market is right now we're seeing futures in a lot of these overnight individual names that are actually dumping literally as we speak. We see the SPY that is down overnight about nearly 1%. We'll be talking about possibly why after we had pretty dovish remarks from the Fed today after the interest rate decision. We'll be breaking that down. What could that mean, going into 2026 now? And now that we got that past us, how is the broader market? What are the tailwinds and what are the headwinds that are in front of it? On top of that, we'll be talking about Palantir, where it's sitting at currently, also kind of joining in on this dump as we speak, and what we could be possibly seeing into the weekend. So if you're a new or returning viewer, hit that like button, subscribe for daily videos. We're trying to hit 30,000 subscribers. Help me hit that goal. Pop it up on the screen here. Let's talk about Palantir. Now, Palantir actually did quite well in terms of the intraday trading session, and we see it even pop up here to about 190 and close right here at 187. What we're seeing right now in the overnight session is Palantir is falling actually quite quickly to about 183 right here. It's currently at 183.50, down about $4 to $5. That correlates to about 2.5%. Palantir is trading overnight, and there's some interesting price action that's occurring right now. It's interesting that this is kind of occurring this quickly in the overnight session. We'll be talking about what my possible theory is on why we could be possibly seeing this price action after the actual, I thought it was a decent Fed speech today. Palantir, though, in this consolidation phase, has a lot of support between the 170s and the higher 180s or the mid 180s right here. So I won't be too concerned depending on what happens with the price action going on tomorrow. But literally what we did just see recently with Palantir, of course, remember, was the announcement of that Navy deal that was worth about $448 million, working to deploy its Foundry software as a ship operating system, working to modernizing the supply chains for nuclear submarine production and repairs. So these ship creations take a lot of data from the Navy. So Palantir is going to be leveraging basically its software to help with working on basically making this a quicker process with its AI solution. So in terms of Palantir, it's kind of just following the macroeconomic situation as we speak. And what is that macroeconomic situation? What we're seeing right here, you can see futes are red with the US 500 at 68.52. Currently, what we saw with the S&P 500 index, that actually closed right here at 6886. So near all-time highs. All-time highs are like at 6920, I believe. So where this buy sits right now is down about $5, $6. Currently, if we zoom in on it, you can see some big red candle bars right here below the 50 and the 200 moving day right now at 681. So very interesting to see here. The SPY is currently at 681 after we had a decent meeting today from the Fed. Amit had came out. I saw this as this was coming out in due time because this was a big market event and it could be a big market mover. But what they decided here, the Federal Reserve cut its interest rates by 25 basis points, and we kind of knew that. What was more important was, what was going to be the outlook in terms of was he going to be dovish or hawkish, and what were going to be kind of the guidance going into 2026. So there were 9 votes for cutting 25 basis points, 2 votes against cutting, and 1 vote for 50 basis points. In terms of the outlook, because the market basically already priced this in, the outlook for the Fed was about 25 basis points, 1 more cut in 2026, and 1 more in 2027. Another bullish thing in terms of liquidity, quantitative easing, is that the Fed announces that they're going to begin purchasing bonds by December 12th right here, $40 billion of short-term treasury bills over the next 30 days. I'd agree here with Amit that quantitative easing is back. Great to see here that quantitative tightening is officially over. And also that inflation is coming in lower, saying that tariffs may not be running the economy hot. So very, very dovish remarks, and the market actually liked this. In terms of the actual closes that we saw for like Palantir, even specifically for NVDA, we saw some decent closes above the 180. You can see NVIDIA here is below 180 right now as we speak. We saw a lot of liquidity coming into crypto, especially with BMNR. We'll be talking about that. But currently, we're seeing a sell-off. One of the big things that we saw that I think earnings on Oracle could be a little bit of an indicator, because considering here Oracle was at 222 at market close, basically right after the earnings, they come down about 13% in the after hours in the overnight session, continuing to see some red candles and some selling pressure, currently at 194. Now Oracle falls after missing their quarter two adjusted revenue. Let's kind of break it down here, just looking at the headline numbers. Adjusted revenue right here is at 16.06 billion versus 16.21 billion, so slightly miss their revenue. However, beat their earnings per share at 226 versus 164. That's quite a good earnings beat. And even with Oracle Cloud Infrastructure revenue right here at 4.1 billion versus 4.09 billion. One of the big things in terms of, I think that's starting to bring some fear. You could have this revenue miss right here. So talking about that with this long-term future kind of rev visibility, near-term monetization is lagging. That could be a possibility. But more people are kind of pointing out right here the capital expenditures. The CapEx hiked here to about 50 billion versus the 35 billion that were guided after quarter one. So this is a large increase in capital expenditures. Why what we're seeing here, when the uncertainty that's starting to arise, is now a lot of these tech companies are borrowing a lot of money and taking on a severe amount of debt to help try to fund the AI infrastructure versus earlier funding that coming from internal cash flows. So now they're acquiring a ton of debt. And I mean, I think we saw this headline actually with Oracle not that long ago in terms of the amount of debt that they're taking on. Maybe it was just actually official in the earnings report here that we're seeing a little bit of sensitivity to the news flow right here. So in terms of sensitivity to that capital expenditures, of course, that's an uncertainty, especially for the people that are calling AI a huge bubble or that we're at the top. That could be, of course, a fear. However, in terms of these companies, they need a ton of money to build out these actual AI type of infrastructure plays and projects that they need in order to succeed and to try to be, I would say, a top competitor within the AI race. This is a quick race that everybody wants to get their hands and their feet wet. So in terms of capital expenditures, in terms on return on investment, taking on the debt of these big companies, that's where I think possibly, if you couple that with the revenue miss here, I don't know, despite the AI buzz, that's why I think we're possibly seeing a little bit of the sell-off. So once this cools off, unless I'm entirely wrong, we could just be a sell-off just because, hey, FOMC was quite dovish and we saw a decent kind of liquidity that came in terms of a lot of the dovish remarks. And now possibly, sometimes the opposite just does happen. We don't know what the market's going to do. So are we seeing a post-FOMC dump after we saw a decent amount of buying pressure kind of in the intraday? Those are two possibilities. Let me know what you think down in the comments. But toggling over here, crypto basically experiencing the exact same thing. Dude, Bitcoin and Ethereum cannot catch a break here, and that's kind of looking at BMNR. But Bitcoin is back under 90,000 after this came up here to about 94,000 that we saw on the intraday. 94,000 right here. And even looking at that, Ethereum loses its 3,300 floor, and that kind of really stinks because Ethereum is trying to work its way back to 3,500. You can see it tested 3,400 a few times, unfortunately got rejected there at about the 3,400, and now back at this 3,100. How that correlates to BMNR right now is currently at 37.88, so it is kind of following the same trend. BMNR had a nice push into the market close right here to about $42, and then this is where you see a large sell-off, so profit taking. A lot of profit taking across the board. To me personally, this is just kind of volatility that's coming, I think, with FOMC and then, of course, with Oracle earnings. However, the data center stocks didn't perform quite well today. They kind of just sat there, and we saw some selling pressure actually, of course, across the board. Things like CoreWeave are down to 84. You got Cypher down to 1779 now. I ran at 42. So Nebius are here at 90. Not necessarily mad or anything like that. I guess I'm just waiting for some of this volatility to settle out. One of the bullish things, though, is that we do have FOMC that is now behind us. So now that we have that behind us, in terms of we're probably going to be looking at, the market's going to be looking at, the next Fed, of course, still taking some of the actual, you could say, statements from Powell. However, his last month, I believe, is going to be May of 2026. So market's going to be forward looking, more looking to see what the next Fed is going to be, kind of coming out with announcements. We'll see what happens there. But nonetheless, not horrible. The S&P 500 index right here at 68.86. This could open up around 6,800. Now, this has really traded between 6,800 for a while. So there's a strong level of support right at about the 6,800. If we lose the 6,800, that's where you could see maybe a further breakdown. But I am not necessarily throwing up any white flags or anything like that in terms of a long position or short-term bullishness. I think this is a lot of volatility and just looking to personally possibly buy the dip here. Peace out, take care, and I'll catch you guys later.